moment she said those words again, something snapped inside me. We stood in our kitchen after yet another argument that had started over something trivial but escalated into emotional warfare. "That's not what I meant," she insisted, her voice dripping with false innocence while her eyes watched me coldly, calculating my reaction. 3 years of marriage, and this phrase had become her perfect weapon. It was brilliant, really, a tactical missile that could never be defended against. Whatever I heard, whatever hurt me, whatever crossed boundaries, it was always my misinterpretation, never her intention. I remember when it first started. We were having dinner with my parents, and she made a cutting remark about how I'd been passed over for promotion because I lacked the necessary assertiveness. My parents looked uncomfortable, and I felt humiliated. Later, when I confronted her, she looked genuinely shocked. "That's not what I meant at all. I was trying to defend you. How could you take it that way?" I apologized for misunderstanding her. That became the pattern. At a friend's wedding, she loudly commented on how I should take fitness tips from the groom. When I mentioned it in the car ride home, her eyes welled up with tears. "That's not what I meant. I was just making conversation. Why do you always twist my words?" Somehow, I ended up consoling her for the pain my misinterpretation had caused. The incidents multiplied. Comments about my earnings. "That's not what I meant." Remarks about my friends. "That's not what I meant." Criticisms of my family. "That's not what I meant." Each time, I would question my own perception, wonder if I was being too sensitive, overthink every interaction. After each incident, I found myself apologizing for misunderstanding her intentions, while she never had to take responsibility for her words. The perfect defense. Impossible to argue against because who was I to tell her what she really meant? Last night's argument started when she suggested my best friend's wife was flirting with me. "You seem to enjoy the attention," she said with a smirk. When I pointed out how inappropriate and untrue that was, defense came out immediately. "That's not what I meant. I was just observing that she seems to really value your friendship. Why are you so defensive?" Standing in our kitchen now, watching her deploy the same tactic yet again, I felt a strange calm replace my usual frustration. For the first time, I saw her clearly, not as my wife who sometimes said hurtful things, but as someone who had developed a system of control that was slowly eroding my self-confidence. "You always misunderstand me on purpose," she continued, her voice rising. "It's like you want to make me the villain." I didn't argue. I didn't try to defend my interpretation. I simply nodded, turned, and walked to my home office. I closed the door, sat down at my computer, and began documenting every instance I could remember where this phrase had been used. Dates, contexts, exact quotes when possible. She knocked on the door 20 minutes later, asking if I was going to sulk all night. I didn't respond. I continued typing, methodically creating a record that even she couldn't twist or reinterpret. This wasn't about winning an argument anymore. This was about reclaiming my reality. And soon, my actions would speak so loudly that no defense, no matter how perfect, could drown them out. For the next week, I became a detective in my own marriage. I started carrying my phone in my pocket with the voice recorder running during our conversations. Not illegal in our state, just one-party consent needed. The first recordings were eye-opening when played back. What felt like innocent conversations in the moment revealed themselves as subtle psychological warfare when examined objectively. Maybe if you networked more like your colleague, you'd be more successful. Then later, "That's not what I meant. I was trying to motivate you." I began noting patterns. She would say something undermining, wait for my reaction, then deploy her defense. If I didn't react, she would escalate until I did. The goal wasn't communication, it was control. On Friday evening, she suggested we have dinner at her favorite restaurant. Throughout the meal, she was charming, attentive, even flirtatious, a complete departure from her behavior at home. When the waiter brought the check, she reached for it and loudly announced, "I'll get this since you're still waiting on that raise." Several nearby diners glanced our way. The comment was perfectly calculated, emasculating me publicly while maintaining plausible deniability. I said nothing, just nodded slightly and reached for my water. Her eyes narrowed at my lack of reaction. "What? Did I say something wrong?" "No," I replied calmly. "Thank you for dinner." The drive home was tense. She kept glancing at me, waiting for the argument to start. When it didn't, she finally broke the silence. "You've been distant lately. Is there something going on I should know about?" I parked in our driveway before answering. I've been thinking about our communication patterns. What does that mean? Her voice took on a defensive edge. Just that I've noticed when I express that something you've said has hurt me, you consistently tell me that's not what you meant. She crossed her arms. So I'm not allowed to clarify my intentions? You'd rather I just let you misinterpret everything I say? I'm not saying that at all. I'm pointing out a pattern. This is absurd, she snapped. You're tracking what I say like some kind of prosecutor. That's not what a healthy marriage looks like. I agree, I said quietly, getting out of the car. Inside, the argument escalated. She paced the living room, gesturing wildly. So now I'm walking on eggshells in my own home because you've decided to scrutinize every word I say? I'm simply pointing out a pattern of behavior. A pattern? You mean me defending myself when you twist my words? I took out my phone, opened the recording app, and pressed play. Her voice filled the room. I'll get this since you're still waiting on that raise. Then my calm response. Her face transformed, first shock, then fury. You've been recording me? Without my consent. One-party consent state, I replied. And yes, I needed objective evidence of our interactions. Evidence? What is this, a trial? This is insane. This is a complete invasion of privacy. I played another clip from earlier that week. Maybe if you dressed more professionally, people would take you more seriously. Then later. That's not what I meant. I was trying to help your career. She lunged for my phone, but I moved it away. This isn't about catching you saying something wrong. It's about establishing reality. The reality is you're acting crazy, she shouted. Recording your wife? What kind of person does that? Someone who's tired of questioning his own sanity. Her strategy shifted instantly. Tears filled her eyes. I can't believe you don't trust me. After everything we've been through. I didn't flinch. This isn't about trust. It's about truth. The truth is you're becoming someone I don't recognize, she whispered, voice breaking. The man I married would never treat me like this. I met her gaze steadily. The woman I married wouldn't need to say that's not what I meant after every hurtful comment. She stared at me, realizing her usual tactics weren't working. Then she stormed upstairs, slamming our bedroom door. I stood alone in the living room, feeling strangely calm despite the confrontation. The battle lines were drawn. She had her perfect defense. Now I had something more powerful, irrefutable evidence. The tension in our home became unbearable over the next few days. She alternated between cold silence and tearful accusations about my paranoia. I maintained my composure, continuing to document every interaction while going about my normal routine. Her inability to provoke me into our usual arguments clearly unsettled her. Tuesday evening, my phone buzzed with a text from my closest friend asking to meet for a drink. I hadn't confided in anyone about the situation, but something in his message suggested urgency. I told her I was heading out for a bit. She barely acknowledged me, engrossed in her phone. At the bar, my friend looked uncomfortable as we sat in a corner booth. After some small talk, he finally got to the point. Look, I need to tell you something, and you're probably not going to like it. He explained that his wife had been having lunch with mine last week. During their conversation, my wife had made several disturbing comments about me, claiming I was becoming increasingly unstable, suggesting I might be having some kind of breakdown, and even hinting that she was concerned about my behavior toward her. She told my wife she's afraid you might become violent. He couldn't meet my eyes as he said it. She asked my wife not to tell me because she's handling it. What's going on, man? The strategic brilliance of her move hit me like a physical blow. She was laying groundwork, creating a narrative where any evidence I presented would be dismissed as the desperate actions of an unstable man. I felt a cold anger unlike anything I'd experienced before. I took a deep breath and told him everything: the constant psychological manipulation, the gaslighting, the recordings. I played a few clips from my phone. His expression shifted from concern to shock as he listened. Jesus, he muttered when I finished. I had no idea. This is calculated. It gets worse, I said, showing him recent text messages where she claimed I was twisting her words when I referenced comments she'd made verbatim. He shook his head. My wife mentioned that your mother-in-law has been saying similar things about your father-in-law for years. Like mother, like daughter, I guess. That piece of information clicked something into place. I'd always found her mother's behavior toward her father strange. The way she would make cutting remarks then act bewildered when he reacted. Her father had grown increasingly withdrawn over the years, now barely speaking at family gatherings. A chilling glimpse of my possible future. What are you going to do? My friend asked. End it, I replied without hesitation, but not before making sure everyone sees exactly what's happening. When I returned home, she was waiting for me in the living room, a glass of wine in hand. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. Where have you been? She asked lightly. With a friend. Anyone I know? Her tone was casual, but there was an edge to it. Yes, I replied simply, offering no further information. Her fingers tightened around the wine glass. You're being very mysterious lately. Am I? I think I'm being quite transparent. She set down her glass. I've been thinking about our situation. I think we should see a marriage counselor. The move was predictable. Get an authority figure involved who would only see her polished, public persona while I appeared defensive and paranoid. I don't think a counselor would help with dishonesty, I replied. That's exactly what I mean, she exclaimed. You keep accusing me of lying when I'm just trying to explain myself. You refuse to believe that your interpretations might be wrong. I don't think recordings can be misinterpreted. Her expression hardened. Those selective little clips you've been gathering? That's not a representation of our relationship. That's you cherry-picking moments to fit your narrative. I nodded, as if considering this. You know what? You're right. For a moment, relief flashed across her face. That's why I've decided to be more thorough, I continued. I've been recording all of our conversations in full. No selective clips. No editing. Just the complete, unfiltered reality of how we interact. The color drained from her face. You've been recording everything? Everything, I confirmed. For weeks now. I want those recordings deleted, she demanded, voice shaking. All of them. Now. No, I replied calmly. I don't think I will. She stood up, hands trembling. You can't do this. This isn't legal. One-party consent state, I reminded her. Perfectly legal. Her mask slipped completely then. No tears, no wounded innocence. Just pure, cold fury. You think you're so clever with your recordings. Nobody will believe you. They'll see exactly what I want them to see. A controlling, paranoid husband who's losing touch with reality. I smiled for the first time in weeks. Thank you for finally being honest. The look she gave me would have shattered glass. In that moment, we both knew the game was over. The only question was who would control the endgame. The annual family gathering at her parents' house arrived the following weekend. She'd insisted we maintain appearances by attending together, probably assuming I wouldn't dare confront her in front of family. What she didn't realize was that I'd chosen this exact setting for my endgame. During the drive, she attempted to establish ground rules. Let's put aside our issues for today, she suggested with forced pleasantness. My family doesn't need to be dragged into our private matters. I nodded without committing to anything. Her confidence was palpable. These were her people, her territory. She'd controlled the narrative here for years. When we arrived, she immediately transformed into her public persona. Cheerful, attentive, the perfect wife. Her performance was flawless as she told amusing anecdotes about our life together, carefully edited to present herself as supportive and me as somewhat hapless but lovable. Her father caught my eye across the room during one of these stories. There was something in his gaze, recognition perhaps, a flash of understanding between two men experiencing the same reality distortion field. During dinner, her mother dominated the conversation in a manner strikingly similar to her daughter's, making subtly cutting remarks then acting surprised when anyone took offense. I watched her father retreat further into himself with each interaction, occasionally nodding mechanically. So how are things really going with you two? Her sister asked during a momentary lull in conversation. Before I could respond, my wife jumped in. We've had some communication issues lately. He thinks I'm too critical. She laughed lightly, patting my hand. I keep telling him that's not what I mean when I say things, but he takes everything so personally. Several family members nodded sympathetically. I noticed her mother giving her a slight approving smile. Actually, I said calmly, I've been wanting to discuss that with everyone. I took out my phone and placed it on the table. I've been collecting some examples of our communication patterns that I think would be illuminating. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. My wife's hand clamped onto my wrist under the table, her nails digging into my skin. This isn't the time or place, she hissed. I think it's the perfect time and place. I replied, loud enough for everyone to hear. Since you've already brought up our communication issues. Her mother intervened smoothly. Let's not turn dinner into a therapy session. Family gatherings should be about harmony, not airing dirty laundry. I smiled at her. With all due respect, I think honesty between family members is more important than artificial harmony. Don't you agree? Before anyone could respond, I pressed play on the first recording. The dining room filled with her voice. God, your family is so boring. I don't know how I'll survive another Christmas with them. Then, from a later recording. That's not what I meant. I love your family. You always twist my words. The table fell silent. Her sister's mouth opened slightly. Her father stared intently at his plate. I played another clip, her mocking my career aspirations, followed by her tearful denial when confronted. Then another, her telling a friend on the phone that my best friend's wife was desperate for my attention, followed by her accusing me of being defensive when I objected to this characterization. With each recording, her face grew paler. When I finally stopped, the silence was deafening. These are obviously taken out of context, she finally said, voice trembling with barely controlled rage. He's been recording me secretly for weeks. Who does that? This is a complete invasion of privacy. One-party consent state, her father said quietly, speaking for the first time that evening. All eyes turned to him in surprise. That's not the point, Dad, she snapped. He's trying to humiliate me in front of my own family. No, I corrected her. I'm trying to establish reality. For 3 years, I've been told that what I hear isn't what you mean, that my perception is wrong, that I'm misinterpreting your words. These recordings prove otherwise. Her mother rose from her seat. I think you should leave. Now, I nodded, standing up. I understand. But before I go, I placed a small USB drive on the table. This contains every conversation we've had over the past month, unedited, including her phone conversation last week where she told her friend she was creating a narrative that I'm becoming unstable and potentially dangerous. Her sister gasped. My wife lunged for the USB drive, but her father was quicker, picking it up and slipping it into his pocket. Dad, she protested. He looked at her with a sadness that suggested decades of similar experiences. I think we should hear everything. I walked toward the door, turning back one last time. I'm not trying to win anyone to my side. I just needed the truth to be known. As I stepped outside, I heard her shrill voice rising behind me, the familiar refrain. That's not what I meant. For the first time in years, I smiled genuinely as I walked to my car. Let her try to explain those recordings away. My actions had finally spoken louder than any defense she could muster. I checked into a hotel that night, turning off my phone after sending a brief text to my friend explaining what had happened. For the first time in years, I slept peacefully, without analyzing every interaction or questioning my own perceptions. When I turned my phone back on the next morning, there were 27 missed calls and dozens of text messages. Some from her, ranging from furious accusations to tearful pleas. Several from her family members, her sister expressing shock, her father asking to meet privately. Even her mother had called, though she hadn't left a message. I responded only to her father, agreeing to meet him for coffee later that day. At the cafe, he looked 10 years older than he had at dinner, his shoulders hunched as if carrying an invisible weight. 42 years, he said without preamble as I sat down. That's how long I've been married to her mother. He stirred his coffee slowly. When you played those recordings, it was like hearing my own life. The same phrases, the same tactics, the same defense. He looked up, his eyes tired but clear. I convinced myself it was normal, that all marriages had these challenges, that if I just tried harder to understand her perspective, things would improve. I nodded, understanding exactly what he meant. I stayed for the children, he continued. Then I stayed because leaving seemed more difficult than enduring. Now I'm 70, and I realize I've spent my life being told that what I experienced wasn't real. I'm sorry, I said, meaning it. He shook his head. Don't be. You've done what I never had the courage to do, confronted the situation directly, with evidence. We talked for over an hour. He told me about the early years of his marriage, how the pattern had started subtly then intensified over time, how he'd eventually stopped expressing any opinions or needs to avoid the inevitable gaslighting that followed. As we parted, he clasped my hand firmly. Whatever you decide, know that at least one person in this family sees the truth. Back at the hotel, I drafted an email to her, outlining my intention to file for divorce. Factual, unemotional, clear. I specified that all future communication should go through lawyers, attaching contact information for the attorney I'd already consulted. 3 hours later, she showed up at my hotel room. I wasn't entirely surprised. Boundaries had never meant much to her. "We need to talk," she insisted when I opened the door. "I've said everything I need to say," I replied, not inviting her in. "You humiliated me in front of my family. You made me look like a monster. Your own words made you look that way." I just stopped pretending not to hear them. Her strategy shifted instantly. Tears filled her eyes as she leaned against the doorframe. "I know I've made mistakes. I know I've hurt you, but that's not who I really am. I can change. We can get counseling." "Too late," I said simply. "How can you throw away 3 years of marriage without even trying to fix things?" Her voice trembled perfectly, a performance I would have found convincing just weeks ago. "I've been trying to fix things for 3 years. Every time I expressed that something hurt me, you told me that's not what you meant. Every time I pointed out a pattern, you accused me of misinterpreting. There's nothing to fix because you don't believe there's a problem." Her tears vanished, replaced by cold fury. "You think you've won? You think my family will take your side after one dinner with some edited recordings? I don't care whose side anyone takes. This isn't about winning. It's about refusing to participate in a relationship built on manipulation." "You'll regret this," she hissed. "I'll make sure everyone knows exactly what kind of man you really are." I smiled slightly. "More recordings might be necessary, I see." That stopped her cold. She stared at me, calculating her next move. Finally, she straightened up, composing herself. "Fine. Have it your way. But don't expect this to be easy. I'm entitled to half of everything." "Speak to my lawyer," I replied, closing the door gently but firmly. Through the door, I heard her final attempt. "That's not what I meant about the money. I was just stating facts." I didn't respond. There was nothing more to say. The divorce proceedings were as contentious as expected. She alternated between painting herself as the victim of an emotionally abusive husband and claiming she'd never meant to hurt me. I'd simply been too sensitive. Her mother backed her narrative enthusiastically, but something had changed in the family dynamic. Her father testified about the pattern of behavior he'd witnessed throughout our marriage. Her sister, after listening to more of the recordings, reluctantly admitted that she'd seen similar behavior but had dismissed it as normal marital friction. My attorney played selected recordings during key moments in the proceedings. The judge listened impassively, but I noticed her expression harden each time my wife attempted to claim that's not what I meant about statements captured in her own voice. For months after that fateful family dinner, our divorce was finalized. The settlement was fair, equitable division of assets with no ongoing financial entanglements. A clean break. As I left the courthouse for the final time, I felt neither triumph nor regret, just a profound sense of relief. The weight of constantly questioning my own reality had lifted. My actions had finally spoken louder than her words ever could. 1 year later, I sat across from her father at the same cafe where we'd had our conversation after the family dinner. We'd maintained contact throughout the divorce and developed an unexpected friendship. In many ways, he understood my experience better than anyone else could. "She's engaged again," he informed me, watching for my reaction. I nodded, feeling nothing but a distant concern for her new fiancé. "How long have they been together?" 6 months. "He's younger. Seems compliant." He frowned. I tried to talk to him, but he thinks I'm just a bitter old man interfering in my daughter's happiness. "You can't save someone who doesn't want to be saved," I replied. He sighed heavily. "No, you can't. But at least I tried." He took a sip of his coffee. "Her mother still won't speak to me. Says I betrayed the family by supporting you." After our confrontation, he'd finally stood up to his wife after decades of submission. They were still together, but the dynamics had shifted dramatically. He'd reclaimed his voice, inspired partly by my example. "Do you regret it?" I asked. "Standing up for the truth?" "Never." He smiled ruefully, though dinner conversations are considerably more tense these days. We talked about his grandchildren, my new apartment, the consulting business I'd started. As we were about to leave, he hesitated, then asked the question I knew had been on his mind. "Are you seeing anyone?" I nodded, taking it slow. "She's..." I paused, searching for the right words. "She's direct, honest. If something bothers her, she says it plainly. If I misunderstand her, she clarifies without making me question my perception." "Sounds terrifying," He joked, but his eyes were serious. And wonderful. It is, I agreed. Both. Later that evening, I received a text from an unknown number. It was her. Despite changing my number twice, she always seemed to find ways to contact me. I heard you're dating someone. Hope she knows what she's getting into with your trust issues and recording habits. I didn't respond, but saved the message, old habits die hard. Then I blocked the number again. My phone rang almost immediately. My friend calling with a warning. Just a heads up, your ex has been contacting people in our circle, telling them you were emotionally abusive, that the recordings were manipulated, that you're potentially dangerous. Let me guess, that's not what she meant if confronted? Exactly. Classic move. I thanked him for the warning, but felt strangely untouched by her attempts to rewrite history. The people who mattered knew the truth. Those who chose to believe her narrative without question weren't people I needed in my life anyway. The revelation that had changed everything for me wasn't just about her behavior. It was about my response to it. For years, I tried to reason with someone who had no interest in reason. I'd attempted to establish mutual understanding with someone committed to distorting reality. I'd sought compromise with someone who saw relationships as power struggles to be won at any cost. My mistake hadn't been failing to communicate better. It had been continuing to engage in a game rigged from the start. The lesson hadn't been easy or cheap. 3 years of marriage, thousands in legal fees, and countless hours of therapy to rebuild my sense of reality. But the freedom I'd gained was priceless. 2 weeks later, I was having dinner with my new girlfriend when I overheard a familiar phrase at a nearby table. A woman was telling her partner, "That's not what I meant," in that same tone that had become so familiar to me. I watched as the man's face fell, as he began to apologize for misunderstanding. I recognized the pattern instantly, his uncertainty, her confidence, the subtle power dynamic establishing who defined reality in their relationship. For a moment, I considered saying something, warning him, showing him the future that awaited if he continued down this path. Instead, I reached across the table and took my girlfriend's hand. "There's something I want to tell you about my marriage," I said quietly. "Something important." She squeezed my hand encouragingly, her eyes direct and clear. As I shared my story, keeping my voice low but honest, I noticed the man at the other table glancing over occasionally, listening. Whether by coincidence or design, I'll never know if my words reached him. But in that moment, I realized that the most powerful action I could take wasn't confronting my ex-wife or warning others about her specifically. It was simply speaking the truth about a pattern many experience, but few recognize until it's too late. My ex had indeed perfected the "that's not what I meant" defense. It had worked flawlessly until the day my actions finally spoke louder than her words. Not through shouting or drama, not through retaliation or vengeance, but through the simple, powerful act of refusing to accept a distorted reality any longer. Sometimes, the most decisive action you can take isn't what you do, it's what you refuse to do. In my case, I refused to keep playing a game I could never win. And in that refusal, I found a victory more complete than any argument could have provided. I reclaimed not just my relationship status, but my perception of reality itself. That was an action that spoke loud enough to drown out any defense, no matter how perfect.
Our story has come to an end. If you've made it this far, how about subscribing to our channel? It helps us immensely. I've selected 2 other videos for you that I'm sure you'll enjoy. Feel free to click on them. I'll be waiting for you in the next story. See you soon.